Ram, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. A warm and a pleasant welcome to all the viewers. This is Ram Tiwari, your community manager at Learn for Cause, and also your host for this segment. And I welcome you all to yet another session of Women of Code Summit 2022. In this session, we'll be hosting a person who is a developer relation engineer at Appwrite and a senior student pursuing computer science and engineering at Amity University, Noida. He has worked with various technologies such as .NET, Microsoft Azure, etc. He has spent last 2 years empowering tech communities as an MLH Coach, Twilio Champion, Gold Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador, and also a Google Developer Student Club lead. He has been awarded Azure Heroes, Community Hero, and AI Ambassador digital badges by Microsoft and is also a member of .NET Foundation. So let's welcome and give a huge round of applause to none other than Mr. Aditya Oberai.
Hey, hi,
Hi
hi
Aditya, the stage
everyone.
is all yours.
Thank you so much. Um, Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining in, for hanging around with us, and thanks a lot to the Learn for Cause team for having me on. It's definitely always great joining you folks. I think I'd been here once as well, um, in one of the past events, so it's always been nice working with you folks and just having these sessions with you all.
Uh,
Yeah. And
Aditya, so my first question to you would be, how are you and how's life been, post COVID and post COVID period? So just share your insights. Yes, go ahead.
oh yeah, sure. I think it's interesting. To be honest, it's been 2 years, almost 2 years, since things closed off, and these 2 years have been rather. I'll say I can't honestly say they've been bad for me personally. A lot of opportunities came up because of these remote transitions, have which I have been able to pick up, which have really enhanced my career so far. But they've brought with them their problems as well, right? These have been 2 difficult years. Um, our personal lives all got shaken up with this. College lives all got shaken up. I think I left college before second year ended, and now it's my final semester, and now things are opening back, but I don't have offline classes anymore because final semester I have two MOOCs that I have to do. So yeah, it's very different because half of college went away just like that. But that being said, work's been good. I've had good opportunities to work, to collab, and yeah, I'm looking forward to how things go forward from here.
That's great, Aditya. So I can see that your life has been, taking turn, and you have turned the tables around. So okay, let's get started. So my second question to you would be that, we would like to share the developer relations, because this is now the buzzing trend that has been going on. So what are your views on this, on the same?
I think as far as DevRel goes, it's become a point of conversation for a lot of people, but it's not necessary that everyone fully understands what DevRel is. right? Some people might say it's going up on stages. Some people might say it's organizing an event. Some people might say it's writing an article. And the answer to all of them is that yes, it's all of them and more. So the first thing that I got to do here is maybe talk a little about what DevRel actually is, or developer relations actually is, and you know then talk about how people can participate in that, how people can get started there. So first things first, what really is DevRel? In my opinion, in my experience, developer relations is a bridge between a product or an organization and the developers the work with it, or the community. And now this bridge is necessary to ensure that there is a communication flow at all points, whether that is educating developers, whether that is building new samples, whether that is going up on stages, whether that's organizing new events, improving feedback loops, improving user research practices to understand problems and then be able to help out find solutions. Those are all parts of DevRel. Those are all components that DevRel touches upon. So that way, DevRel gives a good balance between code and community. You know, so that's what DevRel is in my experience, in my opinion. It isn't just one or the other. It's a balance of both. Um, it's a bridge between the two. That's what it is. And if you think about it, a lot of these can be done by anyone, right? You can write code on your own. You can create content, blogs on your own around these. You can create video content to teach, or articles to teach. You can organize events for your communities, manage communities independently. We've seen all of that happening in today's world. So there are components of these that you can individually learn or get experience around, even if not together formally, because DevRel isn't just a job. You don't need to to have the job to be able to do this. It's a practice, it's a habit, it's a philosophy that you develop over time, or with experience. So yeah, that's what DevRel is.
All right. So, having talked about DevRel, could you also brief, about the hackathon? What is hackathon, and what can people expect from this?
Oh yeah, sure. So hackathons are essentially development marathons, where you come together with your peers, mates, other like-minded people to hack together a solution in a limited time period. Now, this might be a solution to a problem. It might just be something you want to do for fun. Either way is okay, but you're building in a very short period of time. So it's a sprint essentially, not exactly a marathon. It's more of a sprint. Um, and I think hackathons are insanely creative. They allow and enable people to think a little more outside the box, to create some really, really interesting ideas and products and projects. So, hackathons are a space that I've been very close to as well for the better part of 3 years now. I started as an organizer, I went on, continued hacking, and I've organized, mentored, hacked. I've probably touched upon everything that is there in the hackathon world at this point. So yeah, that's a space I've genuinely really loved, and still do.
So, have you observed, or could you spot any differences between online and offline hackathons?
Oh, lots. I started back in the times of offline hackathons as an organizer as well, and I want to add a question to that. Are you asking from an organizer perspective or as a participant perspective?
I think both perspectives should be answered, from an organizer
Okay.
point of view and as well as for the participants, because we have many participants who are eager to, join this hackathon club and who are, not well aware and well known about this. So, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I think I can start from the perspective of a hacker. So The hackathon experience has substantially changed from offline to online, because in an offline hackathon, it would be like you have 200 folks, 300 folks at the same venue. You're sitting together, sleeping nearby, hacking together, eating together, pitching together. So it'd be a very different experience because you were next to these people. You could just walk over, sit with them, relax with them, all of that, right? But it's different with an online hackathon because you're sitting at home. You're collaborating over an online tool, probably like something like Discord. Um, Discord's become a common platform that, for that matter, you're submitting to a your project to an online platform, just sitting in your room. That's what you're doing. That wouldn't always be the case in an offline hackathon. Sometimes, yes, online platforms had already become a thing back then, but you'd end up going forward and you'd have live pitching and judging of that sort. Whereas, that might not happen in a lot of online hackathons. Where you just record a pitch and you upload that, and that's good to go. So there are components of how you participate in general that have changed from offline to online hackathons, simply because it's difficult to accommodate certain factors, right? Like live pitching and all. It would be one thing when you'd have a stage and a panel sitting there, and there have been attempts at bringing that experience as close to the initial one as possible, but milestones and check-ins in the middle, it's sometimes not practical to implement the exact same features of an offline hackathon and an online hackathon, right? It's just the logistics of both are so different that there have been some fundamental changes in how hackathons were being organized in general. So the hacker experience is definitely different. Uh, that being said, online hackathons have pros as well. Fact is that you can participate in a hackathon from anywhere in the world at this point. So there would be so many different opportunities that you would have seen in the past that you couldn't even touch. I was sitting back at home and there I was able to participate at Hack MIT, which is one of the biggest hackathons in the world. Um, you could sit and participate in other hackathons like Hack the North, for example, for sitting in India. And I say India because I'm in India, right? Uh, Normally in the past, it wouldn't have been convenient to travel halfway across the world to do that, but now you can. So that's a perk as well, for sure. My regular hackathon teammates, we'd all be three people in three different cities. That would have been a limitation because like you'd have your teammates next to you. That would have been a condition in an offline hackathon, but online hackathons, that's not a problem. So there we have, there are some pros and cons of and differences between both. Now, from an organizer perspective, online hackathons are so much easier to organize, just so much easier. And the reason for that is that it substantially decreases the cost of organizing. As an online hackathon organizer, I don't have to worry about securing a physical venue. I don't have to worry about food, possible travel, network issues, or Wi-Fi, because we've all got that at home. Mattresses, bedding, washroom scenarios. Like, you've got to, as an organizer, you've got to think about all of that as well.
Yes, the entire
And
logistics part.
very different. The logistics of an offline hackathon are substantially different from an online hackathon. It's so much easier to organize an online hackathon. Maintaining hacker experience is a little more difficult because at an offline hackathon, if someone's committed to come and is at the venue, chances are they're going to work through anyway. But that's not always the case with an online hackathon. So working with sponsors, showcasing, whether they've got the value that they hoped for when they invested, it's become a little more difficult. But there are aspects, at least on the logistical front, it's far easier to organize an online hackathon for sure. So that's there.
Okay, I think you have had an enriching experience. Being a participant and then participating in various hackathons, then organizing hackathons. So I would like to know your insights that how these hackathons provide a platform for community management and for networking purposes.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's look at a hackathon and in the most basic sense. You have a big group of people coming together for a common aim. Does that sound familiar to you? Isn't that a community what a community is?
Absolutely.
Right. So when you organize, you come in with the responsibility of ensuring that this group, this community remains a healthy space. That there are growth opportunities, that there are learning opportunities, that people are ready and willing and open to interact with each other, that you're enabling those situations where people can come together and interact more. So, as organizers, there is a huge amount of opportunity for learning how to manage a community because you're effectively having to do that anyway as an organizer. That is one of the that is a responsibility of the organizers to ensure that it is a healthy community that you've built around these hackathons. So it is your participation basis. They are no less than a community of their own.
Yes, I agree to your point. So definitely, it's building community. You are actually going together for a particular aim, and so we talked about networking and all. So what do you prefer, LinkedIn or Twitter? Which platform could be a
For
better
different
option in
purposes.
terms?
Why I don't choose between one of the two. I just leverage both. Why do I wanna remove one? Why do you want an or when you can have an and?
Okay, so
Right?
it's not either or for you, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's one thing when you know you where you feel that it's you're just not comfortable with one and you just don't want to touch one, and that's a personal thing that you just don't like one, and you discard that, and that's okay. That's totally okay. But if that's not the case, why are you choosing between them when you can choose both of them? I think, in all honesty, I sit more on Twitter these days than LinkedIn. But there was a time when LinkedIn was my priority, when I was focusing more there, because they both have different needs. Right? Those platforms have different purposes, in my opinion. When I was trying to actively look for more opportunities around my internships and all, I'd sit more on LinkedIn because I'd find a lot more concerned people there. Today, I see similar folks around Twitter as well. Plus, Twitter's become a more casual space as well. So if I need to chill a little more, I'm probably doing that on Twitter. But that being said, LinkedIn hasn't lost its value for me, right? If I need to share about my achievements, if I want to talk about my growth, if I want to network with other people, LinkedIn is still a go-to platform for me. So why choose between the two when you can use both?
That makes sense. So, could you share some references, how to build an active community? Do you have any blueprint or any of the references that you could share based on your past experiences? Because, a community is built, but to make it active, it's something that is difficult, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you come up with those
So
challenges and how do you overcome? Yes.
I'll tell you what, there's one group of folks, one community that's been trying to create a lot of impact on that front, and that's community folks. Their medium has some good content around communities, how to revive dead communities, and a lot of other different things on that front. So give them a look for sure. I'll just send over their link, their medium's link. They've got good stuff about communities on there definitely. Plus, I mean, they've got active content on Twitter and also worth a look always. For hackathon organizing, I do have a little presentation I can share. It's a talk I did some time back.
Please go ahead,
And
Aditya. Yes.
yeah, like this one's all about hackathon organizing. So it talks about the process from start to end around a hackathon. So I think this one might help. It's structured more like a talk because that's what it was. but you can look at that, and I think it should help a lot.
Definitely, it would help all the viewers. And thank you for
Yeah,
sharing those links in the chat box as well.
yeah, I believe they're in there already. Yeah. Aside from that, I do have a couple of articles around what is DevRel and um, you know how hackathons impact communities and that sort of stuff on my personal medium as well. So if you want to share that too, that should be totally fine. Like I've got an article. I wrote an article around what is DevRel recently. I've talked about my journey with HackOn, which we organized to have over 8,000 participants. Arguably the largest. It was arguably the largest student-led hackathon in India. And I've also got other content around how hackathons impact developer communities. How there's an article around hackathon to do. So for a hacker who wants to get started, that's another great hackathon that you can look at. Like in the article, sorry, there's another great article on hackathon. So, I've got some of that content up there on my Medium, and people can definitely check that out.
I think that would be, one-stop solution to all the participants. They could view, they could learn, and they could implement as well. So, thank you for sharing your insights, Aditya. I would. So my next question is, how are roles like DevRel, associated with communities?
Well, very, very directly is what I'll say. Um, to the point where you're just straight up connected with the community. Let's let's break down DevRel as two words, right? Developer and relations. When I hear that, there is a focus, there's an emphasis on the word relations, um, and that is because at the end of the day, someone in DevRel is responsible for building a connection with those who leverage your product to create their own applications and solutions, right? um, when you talk about building these connections and relations, what better place to do that than the community around your product? What better place? I because honestly, your community, as we discussed earlier, right? A community is essentially a common group of people with a similar purpose. Now, if you have a community with the purpose of learning about your product, that's going to enable you to work with people who care about your work, what you're doing, the product you're trying to advocate for or evangelize, and that builds a direct connection with you know how you're going to be involved with communities around your product and how the communities impact your product. So uh, the community space is the one where DevRel works the most, because those are the people who you need to collaborate with and support and help and learn from.
Yes, I agree to that point as well. So, what is the importance of a personal brand, alongside when you build a community?
Okay, so typically when we talk about a personal brand, it talks about that's more for you to build your and showcase your presence or image or you know who you are essentially. I don't believe it needs to be mixed with the building of a community. I believe they can be totally independent of each other, because personal brands are focused on you. Your community building is goes beyond. It goes far beyond that. Both are important in their own place, sure, but they don't need to necessarily be interlinked. Even if one helps the other and the other helps back. So you could see that both work in an interlaced manner, but they don't have to be well interlinked. That's just not a mandate, in my opinion. So
Okay,
for that
Aditya.
matter, just a word. You don't need to be like someone with a massive personal brand to build a community. It doesn't matter. You can start wherever you are, solving whatever problems you want, and that's good enough. Waiting for a brand to build, or uh,
Yeah.
if you have a community that needs problem solved at a certain point, focus on them at that point, right? Why do you want to worry? Your brands are going to come up as you go, as you keep doing work. That's not going to be a problem anyway. But it like they are just, you can build them independent of each other. They don't have to be done together, or they don't have to overlap. That's totally a choice.
Okay, Aditya. So, my next question is aligned to the freshers, who wants to seek mentorship. So, could you provide some references to some programs or communities, where a fresher can get mentorship and guidance to get started in their career?
My question is, on that note, we've got the entire of LinkedIn, the entire of Twitter. We've got people active in all of these places. Um, if you want to start, these are good enough platforms to start meeting with people and learning. You can start looking for communities dedicated to specific spaces once you kind of figure out what you want. But in the start, I don't recommend closing yourself off to certain groups or certain communities, because it might cause you to close yourself off to specific thought processes and maybe not grow beyond those. I think what helped me at the start was that I was open to every single piece of information that came, and then I chose to take calls on what worked for me accordingly. Had I closed myself off to specific groups, I don't think that would have helped me out. That isn't to say you shouldn't participate in certain groups. That's always good. That's always great to do that. But as far as mentorship goes, you can learn from everyone everywhere. And if it comes down to you not able to find a name, that's more internalized um, than anything else. So I think that's something that you need to start thinking of on your own, about what you like, and not just about what someone else recommends. Because I'm telling you, had I gone on recommendations, I would not have been doing what I'm doing today. I would not have been in DevRel today. Because the fact is that 1 year ago, the same number of opportunities were just not accessible, at least around me, and today they are. So it really comes down to what you want for yourself, and then the next steps happen. And for that matter, you have to be willing to take some risks too. But the first step, in my opinion, is to figure out what you want before you rush for mentorship on a specific thing. And yeah, once you figured that out and you need help, sure, there are dedicated communities, there are dedicated spaces. There will be generalist groups as well, but the first step is to figure out what you want uh, before you kind of rush to any of those.
All right, Aditya. So, we have a couple of questions from participants as well. I think the first question is quite visible on the screen. I
Yeah.
would read out the question as well. From the organizer side, what are some of the challenges in trying to evolve or even coordinate internal hackathons that perhaps hackathons participants don't see? How would you look at this question?
So, really good question, interesting question. I think it does call out some of the distinctions and the differences between what hackers, how hackers look at a hackathon versus an organizer. So, I kind of like this one has come up, because this way I can talk a little bit about the problems that organizers might face, right? So, like, one is working with sponsors and sponsor expectations. You might see certain hackathons have certain sponsors with tracks, and they might have expectations around a certain number of projects, or they have certain expectations around, if they're sharing some content, they might want some views. And the bigger the sponsor, typically the more the expectations, um, as in terms of, as in the bigger, meaning the bigger their investment. So managing those expectations is tricky, because you kind of have to do that before the hackathon, through the hackathon, and then after as well. Um, Hackathon logistics, especially around prices, for example. Ensuring prices get shipped and delivered at the right time can be such a challenge at times, because you might have problems with logistic providers. There are costs around logistic providers that can be very, very substantial at times. Like, think about this. If suppose you've decided to send out swags to 100 people, you have to manage collection of 100 different addresses, work with the logistics provider to ensure that 100 different pieces uh, arrive at the right time, or if not time, the right pieces are arriving, and then you have to handle the costs of each of those as well. Sometimes it's you might find someone to kind of handle that for you. Sometimes it doesn't happen, so you have to do a lot of stuff on your own. Uh, in in-person hackathons, managing venues and food was such a big problem. It was, and I mean, problem in the sense is just food is a massive cost that you have to think about. That's another thing that comes into mind. Thirdly, but not third, probably fourth. Another thing that I had in mind was hacker experience and participation, right? If it's a hackathon, I start it and I go to end and there's nothing happening in the middle, there's no engagement, people might just leave the hackathon before it begins because it's just not a fun experience, right? So, to ensure that a hackathon is fun, but at the same time, we're not stealing away hacking time from you all, is another challenge that's become quite interesting, because hacker participation in online hackathons has been on a constant decrease because there's a hackathon every week, which is a great thing in my opinion. It's just uh, in the past with an offline hackathon, it wasn't as easy to get to a hackathon. So the sense of urgency to submit and finish and build was very different, right? Now, for a hacker, that's very relaxed. So that's great. But for an organizer, to ensure that you've had an active hackathon, you need to be able to engage in work and incentivize the hackathon. So there is a different thought process there for an organizer, and you may try to achieve those in a healthy manner, which is something that I will say is an experience of its own. It's fun, to be honest, to be able to manage that sort of stuff. It's pretty fun as well if you like that. So yeah, it's great. And I think that link I shared earlier, the HHO 101, that should give a good sort of insight about what sort of steps we see in when organizing, when managing that. It'll actually give a probably a good overview of the sort of stuff we do.
I think that completely answers the first question. Moving further, the second question. So, do you think company? All right. So the question has been: do you think company should start having internal hackathon for increasing innovation?
A lot of companies do. Microsoft has the biggest internal hackathon in the world, which is such a massive activity. I know for a fact a lot of other companies keep internal hackathons as well, because they give a chance for you to people to actually build for themselves rather than for the company only. So internal hackathons are already a thing, and yeah, they're a pretty healthy activity, and more companies should do these.
All right. Can we move on to the next question? Okay. So, how, according to you, hackathons are creating good values to communities and helping to create a more competitive space?
I'm so happy this has come up. I actually wrote an article on this.
That's, I
Like,
think,
this
yeah.
is this is a topic I actually spoke about at a conference last year, which was DevRel Asia. Um, if I talk about how hackathons impact developer communities, hackathons create inclusive spaces where everyone receives an equal opportunity to compete. They're bringing community members closer because it's one big initiative where everyone can come participate together, right? They focus on education. That's a big part of hackathons, to be honest. Hackathons enable more people to push their limits of knowledge, right? To build new solutions in ways they might not have thought about before. Um, Hackathons are driving creativity, innovation, absolutely, because you're not just restricted to specific problem statements or business requirements. You're open to experiment. So creativity and innovation, those are big parts. And they enable social impact. They give members a platform to express, because everyone gets the stage to share their idea and perspective in their demo. So those are all big ways in which hackathons are impacting communities and creating healthier spaces.
All right. So, next question. What is your view on education management companies and their role in improving hackathon?
My first question is, how do you define education management companies? What exactly is meant by that? That's a question I genuinely have, because it can mean a few different things, right? So I'd love a little more insight on that.
All right. So, I think uh, maybe maybe we could actually go further. And so, I think it was a great session. But do you want to add anything else or any parting message to the budding enthusiasts or all the viewers who are actually listening to us?
Um, Honestly, sure. Okay, I think before that, let me just take that question since we are waiting for definition. I mean, if education management companies are referring to organizations that are providing trainings and helping in that sort of thing, that's another place where you get to meet with new people and you're learning and you're build upskilling, right? So they can play well into hackathons because of the education component. But it's just necessary to be mindful of what they're catering, right? If it's education, great. If it's advertising, then also it's all right, in my opinion, as long as a hacker you're able to understand the difference and you're able to understand the aim. And by that means, I don't think it's unethical. It's because, well, as sponsors, we're promoting sponsors anyway, right? So we're just catering what their services are. So that's totally fine. um, there needs to be a healthy impact. If they're enabling any sort of healthy impact, it's just like any other organization. It's helping someone, so that's good. So that's my opinion on that. Just keeping in mind, if it's that sort of, if it's closer to what ed tech is. um, yeah. Any final notes? I think I can probably go to those now.
All right. I think
um,
that was our last question. But
yeah.
I would repeat the previous question now. Is there anything that you would like to share, or any parting message to all the
Honestly,
viewers?
just try your hand and experiment and participate. I think when I talk about hackathons as a hacker, anything in tech that I learned um, as a developer, I started at a hackathon. I built my first app at a hackathon. I used a database for the first time at a hackathon. I used cloud services for the first time at a hackathon. I learned building APIs at a hackathon. And it's a space that allowed me to fall in love with development, simply because I was building for myself and I was building something tangible and real. Um, Hackathons have been a healthy space and they still are. So I just recommend, no matter what your skill level is, go ahead and participate. If you don't know how to build, there's no better place to learn, in my opinion, because I sat and learned at hackathons. I didn't enter with a lot of existing knowledge, and I came out with a little more than I had. So yeah, that's all about hackathons for me. They're a great space, healthy space, and please go ahead and participate.
I think that pretty sums it well. So thank you so much, Aditya, for patiently listening to all our questions and answering them with a lot of conviction and based on your past experiences and your learnings. I think that would definitely help to all the viewers and all the participants as well. I think it was
Mhm.
indeed a great session, and
Thank you so
we are
much.
we are lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And for anyone who wants to connect, you can
Yeah,
connect with
please post
me.
your LinkedIn.
We
Yeah,
are, yeah, like LinkedIn is cool, Twitter is cool. I think I've sent my Twitter already. Let me send my LinkedIn as well. Typically, I will say I tend to stay more active on Twitter, and if you tweet out, I probably just send, like, that's one of the easiest ways to interact with me. So Twitter's great. LinkedIn is also there. So you can just connect on either one of those.
Right. All right, guys. So if you want to, message or get connected, then Twitter is the space, that could actually help you in getting your answers. Uh, I think that's it. So thank you.
Yes.